Hello, in this tutorial I'm going to be sharing with you how to sew a tailor's tack. A tailor's tack is a fantastic way to take markings from the pattern onto your fabric. They are quick and easy to do. Although there are other methods of marking details from your pattern onto your fabric, such as dressmaker's carbon paper, there are times when that isn't suitable for certain fabrics, so I always go back to my trusty tailor's tacks. And you may not have dressmaker's carbon paper available. So I tend to use tailor's tacks when I'm working with lightweight or delicate fabrics, such as silks or perhaps those that have been embellished. If you want to know how to complete these markings using the carbon paper, please follow the link in the description box below. So to sew a tailor's tack, what are you going to need? You're going to need some needles and you're going to need some thread. And there are a couple of different options that I use when it comes to the thread that I'm working with. The one that I generally go to is what's called a basting or tacking cotton thread. And this is a slightly sort of thicker thread, but it's very, very sort of textured. So the good thing about this thread is that it doesn't come out of the fabric once you've put it in very easily. Because it's got a slight sort of texture to it, you'll find that it won't slip out and you won't lose your tailor's tacks. The other good thing about this is that it's really easy to break, so it makes the process really quick. However, there are times when my basting or tacking cotton thread might be a little bit too thick for the fabric that I'm working with, and that's when I go to a silk thread. Silk thread is very, very smooth, so you'll find that if you're working with a very lightweight fabric, that it won't catch or damage the fabric. And you can buy this in lots of different colours. These are the Gutermann silk threads. Now, does it matter what colour thread you use for your tailor's tacks? Obviously, the majority of the time I'll be working with white thread. The only thing that I would point out is that you don't want to use a thread that's so different to your fabric that perhaps you find it difficult to remove. So say, for example, you are working with a beautiful white silk, you're making a wedding dress or something, and you pick the colour red. I would probably stay clear from that because you could find that you get little bits of sort of red thread being left behind in your fabric, and that doesn't look good. So collect up your thread and a needle and we can get started. Obviously, if you don't have a specific thread, it really doesn't matter. You can work with any thread that you've got. I just wanted to share with you what I tend to use and the reasons behind them. To complete the tailor's tacks, you want to leave your pattern on your fabric. So I've cut out the garment that I'm making and I've cut all around the edge of my pattern piece. And the same rules apply here, whether you're working with a single layer of fabric or you cut out with a double layer. It's all pinned together. My pattern piece is pinned onto my fabric. Taking my needle and thread, I'm going to be showing you how to mark the darts. With this dart, you're going to want to mark the little circles. You've got 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. And these are going to be a guide when you sew the dart. Taking the needle, you're going to go from the right to the left of the dot, in and out. You want your stitch to be about an 8-3mm in width, and you want to make sure that you go through all of the layers. So you're going through your pattern and all of the layers of fabric. And you can pull that through. Pull that through until you leave about 2 inches, 5 centimetres of thread at the right side of the dot. Taking your needle again, we're going to go from the top of the dot to the bottom of the dot. Again, in and out. Width of the stitch needs to be about 1/8-3mm. And again, you're going to pull that through. However, here, we want to make sure that you're leaving a loop. Again, the loop could be about 2 inches, 5 centimetres in length from the circle that we're marking. And the thread that's coming out of the bottom of the circle, again, wants to be at least that standard sort of 2 inches, 5 centimetres. And then I can cut that off. And that's going to free my needle and thread. Now, I'm going to cut in my loop here, right at the top of the loop as well. And then you'll be left with 4 bits of thread, of which there are double of each of them, coming out of your hole, or whatever it is that you're marking. And you can use this technique to mark as many things as you want. So little circles on the darts, you can use it to mark notches. You could just do the same technique. A little tip that you can use to aid with sewing things together is to colour coordinate your tailor's tacks. So you could use the same colour for items that are going to be sewn together or that belong together. So perhaps the 3 dots here for the dart could be blue in the thread colour that you use. You could use a different colour down here. This is where the zip or the end of the zip is going to be. You could use a different colour for notches. Have a think and see what works for you. Now I've got one more tailor's tack that I need to complete. I have a double thread through my needle, so I'm ready to go. I'm going to go from the right to the left of the dot, pull that through, leaving excess on the right side of the dot. So I'm not pulling my thread all of the way through, leaving about 2 inches, 5 centimetres. But that's really approximate. It doesn't matter as long as you leave a good amount of thread, that's fine. Taking my needle again, I'm going to go from the top to the bottom, pull that through, but I'm leaving a loop. So I haven't pulled that all the way through, leaving a loop, and make sure that where you've come out at the bottom of the circle, I'm going to leave again about 2 inches, 5 centimetres of thread before cutting that off to free my needle. Now I'm going to cut through the centre of my loop, just like so. Now you would go ahead and you would do all of these details, marking everything on the pattern piece. Once you'd marked everything that you felt you needed to, then we would separate the fabric. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. Firstly, unpin the pattern piece from the layers of fabric. Once you've removed the pins that have attached the pattern to the fabric, you're simply going to remove the pattern from the layers of fabric. And your tailor's tacks, or the bits of thread that are your tailor's tacks, should simply slide off because we've cut through that loop. And you can just gently remove it. You don't want to pull too hard because you don't want to create a hole in your pattern. As you can see, I've removed the pattern from my fabric, and you can see the tailor's tacks that I'm working with. Now I've got 2 layers of fabric here. If you look at the other side of my fabric, you can see that I've got little crosses. That's where we went from right to left and then from top to bottom when we created our tailor's tack. It does make it easier for you to match these up. So, what we need to do now is to separate the 2 pieces of fabric. To separate the 2 pieces of fabric, you're simply going to gently pull the pieces apart. However, you don't want to pull them too much so that you lose the tailor's tacks out of the top layer. You want to pull them so you're about halfway through that remaining 2 inches, 5 centimetres that we left on the top of the pattern. Once you get there, you can cut using a sharp pair of scissors in the middle of your threads, and that will leave you with a mark or a tailor's tack on one piece and the other piece. And you'll simply work your way across your fabric, sort of peeling it apart, doing this ever so gently. Just like so. And that leaves you with markings and tailor's tacks in both pieces of your fabric. This is if you were cutting out with a double layer. Obviously, if you didn't have a double layer of fabric, you could have left everything as it was. You wouldn't need to separate them like so. And there you have tailor's tacks on both pieces of fabric. And these are what you can use to match up the corresponding pieces when you are sewing things together. If you want to know how to sew darts, then please follow the link in the description box below to our corresponding dart video. I tend to leave my pieces with the right sides together with a pin or two in them, just until I need them. In this tutorial, I've shared with you how to sew a tailor's tack, but if you wanted to actually mark details by thread tracing, then I have filmed another tutorial and I'll put a link to that in the description box below. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new. Thank you for watching.